Is reliance on nuclear power a ticking time bomb? We're talking about it in the France 24 debate. Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. We're in the company of Reiko Hasiwaga of the DEVAST Project, Disaster Evacuation and Risk Perception in Democracies. Also with us, Renewables de Châtillon, former advisor to the French government, both at the Environment and Industry Ministries. Bruno Combi, who chairs Environmentalists for Nuclear Energy. And Tom Burke of Third Generation Environmentalism, E3G, who joins us. Welcome back from London. We were talking before the break about the lessons learned on the eve of the 5th anniversary of Fukushima. We're talking about the plans to build a next-generation EPR reactor at Hinkley Point in southwestern England. But there's also what's happened last week with German media accusing French authorities of deliberately downplaying a 2014 incident at France's oldest nuclear power plant at Fessenheim, near the German border in Alsace. The German environment minister reiterating her call to close Fessenheim as soon as possible. And then, this Monday, authorities in Geneva filing a legal suit calling for the decommissioning of the Le Bourget nuclear plant that's 70 kilometers from the Swiss border. One of their lawyers, the former French Environment Minister, Corinne Lepage.
It was built in the 70s without any impact studies. It's situated in a seismic area, which is at risk of being flooded. There's also the risk of a joint earthquake and flooding, which has never been examined. In addition, there are a number of weaknesses due to the age of the station.
Renaud de Châtillon, we've enjoyed cheaper electricity bills in France than in neighboring countries for decades. But was there an undue cost that we did really factor in, which is the cost of winding down these 58 nuclear reactors? It seems daunting.
I think we did it well because we commissioned 58 of about the same factory. So we had cost down. Because if you look at the US, for example, when you have 50 plants, you have 50 different plants. So we had it...
Okay, that's the cost of building them. But now it's the cost of shutting them down. And all the time they're pushing the date back, pushing the date back. When are they going to shut Fessenheim, for instance?
I think you have an autorité de sûreté nucléaire. They have to take their responsibility. If they think Fessenheim is dangerous, they have to order a shutdown.
And what do you think? Because the French are denying those German media reports that there was an incident in 2014 at Fessenheim that was downplayed.
When you go in Germany, you have next to the border, in every store, shut down Fessenheim. Now, maybe it will be Switzerland. I think...
there's one near the border with Luxembourg as well?
Yes, shows dans les Ardennes, next to the Belgium and so on. But I think there are French laws. You have a French lawyer, Corinne Lepage. They have the right to contest before the courts. But it's, of course... I think it's the right way to do things, to go to the courts, not to have... maybe they win, maybe they will lose.
Bruno Combi?
Yes, there are hundreds of anti-nuclear groups which have become very powerful, and they have millions of euros to pay fancy lawyers and ask to shut down everything. That doesn't mean it's unsafe. Nuclear energy remains a major energy source.
Really? Because the Germans shut down their nuclear plants after Fukushima.
Well, they started shutting down the nuclear plants. They will end that in 2022. Let's wait until it's done. For the moment, they are building 1,000 megawatt coal plants to replace those 20 nuclear reactors that they're shutting down. So this is not an environmental progress. And as an environmentalist, I think we should go to the carbon-free sources. And as long as wind and solar are not able to generate massive amounts, we should not close down the nuclear power plants, because that's the only other carbon source that we have that's massively available and it's reliable. And
But
for
you
the
heard
moment in the UK...
But you heard the attorney there for those in Geneva who want Le Bouger shut down, saying
Yes, but
this plant was built in the 70s, not within the same strict norms that they have today, and it's time to close it.
Well, there are millions of cars circulating on the roads that are not in conformity with today's regulation about cars that are built today. And it's just plain stupid to try to apply regulations that are modern regulations stricter today to the old objects that are still in operation. And
But again, we're talking about something where you need zero risk.
No,
it's
well,
not
you
the
never
same
have
as,
zero
as a
risk.
car.
Even if nuclear energy, you don't have zero risk. The question is it safe enough? And it is really the safest thing that you have on Earth today to produce energy. It's much safer, for example, than hydro, and no one asked to stop all the dams and shut them down. It's much safer than driving a car or smoking a cigarette, and there's still millions of smokers and people driving cars all over the place.
Tom Burke?
But it would be very difficult to say that after the Fukushima nuclear accident.
Well, it's still true.
But but the issue that really matters is that it's too expensive. And it's very interesting that the problem that the finance director who resigned from EDF was saying, in effect, was EDF had better things to do with its money than build a reactor in Britain. One of the better things it had to do was to spend money, its capital, on ensuring that the reactors that are currently working in France go on being safe. And what he was saying to the board of EDF was that if you invested in Hinkley, you would make it more difficult to spend the money you need to spend to keep those French reactors safe. And what happened, of course, was the messenger was shot, which is always a prelude to a big disaster.
Renaud, à bord de Châtillon, do you agree?
Two things to say. No, I don't agree with that. Maybe Hinkley is too expensive, but it's...
But do you think this resignation of the chief financial officer at EDF makes Hinkley Point more likely or less likely?
You know, when you have people who is resigning, when he...
It's an unusual step. You don't usually see a CFO quit.
Yes, but...
Over policy, at least.
But when a CFO disagrees with his president, he has to quit.
His word is not... it's like when you divorce, you criticize your husband or you criticize your wife. It's a divorce. So we have to take with very much precaution. I would like to say two things. First, Germany has closed many of his plants, but the plants were very much expensive when you compare with France.
The cost was higher.
Yes, very much higher. So because it's a big industrial success in France to have cost and safety. And second, of course, Fessenheim and so on are old plants, but I hope they are revamped and they are modernized.
About the cost that's said to be so high, I'm afraid that's not true. When you look at the deal, with the contract for difference, which has been signed, the cost for the two plants, you have to underline, it's 2 times 1,600 megawatts. It will be probably the biggest energy production site in the UK after it's finished. So it's a major industrial project. It's not just a little detail. Well, this cost with the contract for different will bring twice the amount of money over 35 years of the guaranteed price. And then after that, the plant can go on for until 60 years, perhaps even 80 years. So it's a good deal for EDF. It's not a bad deal. It's a good financial deal.
All right,
and it's also a good deal for the British consumers, because the alternative, if you want to have carbon-free electricity, onshore wind is becoming saturated in the UK, so you have to go to the offshore wind farms, where the price is a lot more expensive, of more than 50% above that, when you want to build the offshore wind turbines, which are only blowing producing when the wind is blowing. So that's not enough. If you want to produce as much energy as one EPR with windmills, those modern windmills are twice as high as the Cathedral of Paris. They're higher than St. Paul's Cathedral in London, each of them. You have to line them up all the way from Glasgow all around the UK, and you're still not producing as much as the Hinkley Point project. So there's no way you can do that. To produce large amounts, you need those large plants. And the EPR is the solution when you don't have coal and oil and gas.
All right,
I should just point something out just at the moment because what we're hearing is very inaccurate description of what goes on in Britain.
How so?
I'm sorry, I've lost sound. Well, last year, renewables in Britain produced more electricity than did nuclear power in Britain. So the idea that this is an unreliable source that you can't count on to produce large amounts of electricity is simply wrong. It's just not the truth about electricity in Britain. And the proposition is that British consumers should be paying 3 times what they now pay for their electricity in order to guarantee Hinkley the amount of money it needs in order for EDF to build it. Now, that's an enormous bet on the future, and you're assuming that the price of electricity will go up. Well, for the last 10 years in Britain, it's gone down.
Reiko Hasiwaga, you.
I just wanted to, because I'm not a specialist, let's say, of nuclear energy per se, but I wonder then why EDF and Areva are having such economic problems. If you can convince me why that saying that this is the cheap energy, that it's economic success of the France, then I wonder why they're having so much problems.
Well, it's very simple. The French government has forbidden EDF from increasing the price of electricity when it was increasing in every other country and everywhere around the world. So when the price is capped and you cannot increase it, and the cost to operate keep going up, at some point you're losing the fight. And so you have the electricity in France, the price is half of what it is in Germany.
But that's not what analysts point to. Analysts point to the fact that what you have right now the world over is cheap oil, and cheap oil means that that has a knock-on effect on all utility
I would be very,
prices.
very prudent before thinking that cheap oil will go on forever, because everybody knows that this is absolutely untrue. It's not sustainable. Oil, in just 50 years, we've burned the oil that nature has taken 100 million years to fabricate. This is absolutely unsustainable. We'll have to be moving out of oil. Not if we start relying on cheap oil, it won't go on forever. This is a lost fight.
I think the difficulties of Areva are not...
Areva, which is the French nuclear building company.
Building company. First, they signed a bad contract with Finland. And the
because
contract,
in Finland, they're building a next generation plant, which is 9 years. 9 years late in its delivery.
Because
they change the rule every 5 minutes.
They have a bad contract. So I think the contract is better in Finland.
Okay, but what about the one in France? That one is 6 years late.
Yes, but
the one on China is on time and on budget.
You don't have the same contract.
Still, it is 6 years late, and now it's the one at Flamanville in Normandy is not set to open until at least 2018.
Who was Kennedy
Minister of Defense.
Minister of Defense said when you build a prototype, it's P 3.14 more than. So they had a bad contract. So they sold it for 3 billion euros, I think, and it will cost.
So the difficulty
much
is
more.
Finland's paying the price that they were first in. You're saying,
and I think Finland is better with the plant not in production, because the contract is is very, very, very bad. So it is bad
very
contract.
bad for defense. Lots of reactions
and second,
coming in.
They built uranium mines with no uranium. So 2 industrial.
White elephants, you're saying. Lots of reactions have been coming in from viewers on the hashtag F24 debate. The new nuclear power station planned for Hinkley Point in Somerset is years behind schedule, and there are doubts over its financing. Now, you'll recall David Cameron announcing China's participation in the £18 million project. The lion's shares of the cost is to be fronted by EDF, by the French. The economy minister downplaying that shock resignation we've been talking about of EDF's financial officer, which set the price plunging at the start of this week.
It's the largest nuclear project of a developing country today. The technology is 100% French. We will explain to the French people and to everyone who works in the nuclear industry that it's bad, that when a country wants to outfit itself with nuclear technology, well, we consider that we are not capable, it's not good for us.
Tom Burke Are you doubting French technology?
No, I think French technology is absolutely excellent. I think French business practice in relation to, as your other guest was saying, in relation to Areva and EDF has been appalling, and that's in the record. EDF's debt is twice its market capital, and it faces, if it wants to keep its existing reactors in France going, taking on another 100 billion euros in debt. Areva is effectively bankrupt, and so EDF is being forced to buy the nuclear supplier of Areva in order to try to keep it afloat. So there's nothing wrong with French technology, but there's an awful lot wrong with French decision makers.
An editorial in the Financial Times saying the big problem is, again, that this much-touted European pressurized reactor, that's what EPR stands for, remains, well, untested. For EDF, the best option may be to wait until it can prove the technology works and attract other partners. Monsieur Picmal's resignation makes it even harder to defend a deal whose flaws have become increasingly apparent. It is time to move on. Bruno Combi, we can argue about the virtues of EPR, but the fact is since there isn't yet an EPR plant that's up and running, we don't know if it works or not.
There's a simple answer to that question. You see, the EPR reactor, the E stands for evolutionary or European. In the beginning, it was evolutionary. It's not a revolutionary reactor. It's not a very new reactor. It's just an improved type of reactor compared to those we already have. Now, about the schedule, the Finland reactor took 13 years. The construction started in 2005. It'll be finished in 2018. That's 13 years. The Flamanville reactor in France started in 2007. It'll be finished in 2018 as well. That's
6 years late.
That's 11 years. So it's you see the construction time is going down because it's a prototype. The two Chinese EPR reactors.
Because that's the other question.
Exactly.
16 billion euros that EDF's going to spend. What they're worried about is the undue cost, because it is going to be delayed. There's always a run over, isn't there?
I haven't finished my demonstration yet. The Taishan, the two Chinese EPR reactors, exactly the same reactors. Construction has started in 2009. They're going to be finished in 2017. It's the last that started. It'll be the first finished. So that's a construction time of 8 years. And in the future, because this time is going down 13 years, 11 years, 8 years, it's estimated that the normal construction time for this reactor is 6 to 7 years. All the reactors France has constructed in the past, they took 5 years to fabricate. This one is slightly bigger, slightly more complex, but not that much. So it's estimated 6 to 7 years. Now, if you do that
to... That's not true.
Well, yes, it is.
That's not true. No, the last program of French reactors, the N4 program that Areva built for EDF, took 14 years on average to construct, and then another 3 years to get electricity into the grid. So that's the reality. What's happening with the EPR is no different from what happened with the previous French stage of the French nuclear program.
What's interesting about this story is the difference between Europe and China. In China, when they decide to do the work, they do it. In France, we keep talking all the time. We have fancy politicians, we have fancy lawyers and fancy anti-nuclear groups, and we lose a lot of time speaking and going over budget over time. But the technical time and the technical difficulty has not increased. It's the same technology of reactors, basically. And EDF in the past has been able of building those 58 French nuclear reactors in just 20 years. That's 3 per year. And all the anti-nuclear groups now are trying to explain to us that we would not be able to build 2 nuclear reactors in the UK in say 10 years, for example, or 8 years. But what are we talking about? This is just sort of crazy discussion. It's much simpler than what France has already done, and we're facing a very big challenge in the future that we have to provide energy to fuel our modern civilization and keep going. Solar and wind in the UK is less than 3% of the energy today. That won't solve the problem at all. We need a solution that works.
Let me bring in the outsider here, Reiko Hasiwaga. What do you think about this three-way fight that we see brewing between France, neighboring countries, most notably Germany, over those aging reactors, and now a divided British public opinion?
The risk of nuclear accident, after the Fukushima nuclear accident, we say that it is not a question of if, but the question of when. So I think the risk, we can say whatever about for the safety. We can improve the safety culture. We can improve the regulation system. We can improve the technology. And this accident of Fukushima nuclear accident happened in Japan. Of course, Japan is one of the industrialized countries like the UK, like France. So after that accident, we say the risk of having a similar type of Chernobyl, Fukushima type accident is the question of when. So in 2013, the French Institute of Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety, IRSN, estimated that the Fukushima type accident would cost 430 billion euros, which represent 20% of French GDP. So if the question is when that another Fukushima type accident happens, then we should also think about, we talk about economic aspect of the nuclear energy. But if we think about the lesson that we can learn from Fukushima is that accident will cost almost like 20% of the one country's GDP. This is a gigantic, yes.
All right, Renaud Abord-de-Chatillon, I won't do the debate again that we did in the part one of our discussion about the safety of the plants here in France. But let me ask you, God forbid, if there is a problem, is there enough money set aside for it?
Oh, I thought you would ask me if there would be enough money to dismantle. Areva had the money, Areva has lost the money. But I would like to say two things.
So there isn't the money to dismantle those 58 aging plants?
Lost in Finland, lost in the mines, but dismantle. I would like to say two things. First, the EPA is here to have less human errors. Because
it will mean less human error, you're saying. And the second point?
Less human errors. Because all the nuclear accidents were human factor, as you said. Second, why it was foolish to sign in Finland? Because we had a very powerful tool industrial to build 50 reactors. But they're 20 years without any building. So all the engineers and so on were on retirement and so on. So we are.
So again,
it was very difficult
Finland
to
example
accelerate.
Proving a big white elephant. We're running short on time. Renaud Abord-de-Chatillon, I want to thank you. I want to thank Tom Burke in London, Reiko Hasewaga, and Bruno Combi. Stay with us, though. Our Media Watch segment is next. And we say hello to Emma James.
Hi there.
So, as you can see, a heated argument, temperature rising, I saw in one headline, when it comes to the issue of Hinkley Point, most notably.
Indeed, and it seems that there are a whole load of opinions out there, but not too many conclusions. That seems to be what I'm finding. Anyway, everyone has an opinion. No one has any idea exactly what would be the way to make all of this work. But it has given the British media an opportunity to indulge in one of its favourite things, a little bit of French bashing.
Oh, dear.
If we take a look at The Spectator, they say that even the French are starting to realise that Hinkley Point is a nuclear turkey. Even the French. It's not really that insulting to the French. It is basically because this country is one of the prime exponents and backers of nuclear energy. But this article highlights the fact that the British opposition centred on the potential cost to taxpayers, while this newfound aversion by the French is all down to the fact that this building project has spiralled in cost, it's been hit by delays, and they say that no matter how much the British Chancellor now promises to rip off his taxpayers when the project is up and running, it's simply not worth it for France anymore.
Because the deal itself is not yet fully sealed.
No, and what this writer says is that, frankly, the project should have been dumped long ago. Now,
that's hold on, Bruno Combi, I got a question about this because the deal's not yet sealed, but EDF says it's already spent $2 billion.
Yes, that's right. They did the public inquiry and the groundwork already.
2 billion euros?
Well, it costs a lot of money just to prepare, and all the studies and all there's lots of works. There's, millions of hours of work just for the regulations, just to make sure it's safe. There's interaction with the Office for Nuclear Regulation, the British Safety Authority. All this takes a lot of time and work, but it's necessary if you wanted to do it in a safe way.
Now, obviously, at this moment in time, rather unfortunately for the British who are still trying to keep backing going and keep it alive for the dreams of Hinkley Point, it is, of course, the looming anniversary, the 5th anniversary of what happened in Fukushima. But one story that I saw which proves there is life after Fukushima, even if it is a slightly strange life, is this one. A rancher by the name of Masami Yoshizawa is defying all government orders to evacuate the area and to slaughter his cattle. He's just 14 kilometres away from where all this played out. It's a herd of black Wagyu beef that he says he's keeping alive as living proof of what happened here, as the Japanese basically fight to cover up all of this as we build up to the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. But his protest could come at a very high personal cost, because at this ranch, the radiation levels measure about 10 times the safe benchmark. But he says this is a form of bovine protest, and he's vowing to continue.
Reiko Hasiwaga, your thoughts on that rancher who's still keeping his cattle in that contaminated area?
Yes, it's quite. I'm sure he's very attached to his former life and also to his kettles. It's a courageous act, but of course he's also putting a risk, his health on risk. Yes.
All right. I want to thank you, Emma James. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.